is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I am Roberto Rojas, and joining me as always are my three great co-hosts, Maria Britos, Fede Perez, and Ralph Hannah. And guys, we're heading into a new month now. It is finally March. A lot of things are going on. Obviously, we're heading towards the end of the European season. We also have some news that are affecting some Paraguayan players on the relating conflict that's going on in Ukraine and Russia. Got some players that are actually free agents now because of that issue. Heading into obviously what's going on in South America, obviously talk about what's going on in the Copa Libertadores, how one team decided to qualify to another stage of the competition and another one suffering deja vu. We'll talk about who in that sense. Sudamericana is also starting as well. And the big one on this weekend in the league, the Superclasico, the first one of 2022 between Cerro Porteño and Olimpia. We'll obviously dive deep into that. So I'm really excited about this chat, guys. So let's get this started. Let's go to Fede all the way in the mother country first. I mean, a lot has been going on in the country, a lot about politics, a lot of issues from weather, but you got a Superclasico going on. And from what my estimation is and looking at Twitter, it's going to be a full house at La Nueva Olla. And for something that, obviously in this new pandemic type of world, that's really good news to see, especially for the biggest game in Paraguay happening this weekend. So how are things heating up there with the Superclasico happening this weekend, Fede?
Everything's good, Roberto, and plenty of good football really to enjoy here in Paraguay. Still early in the year, just as you said it, we're just entering our third month of the year of this 2022. March is just starting around, and we got Sudamericana, the first games of that tournament happening this week. We got Libertadores heating up because the group stage is just around the corner. For Olimpia, Guarani got out of the competition and penalty shootout. That was a crazy game. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the clausura and obviously the preview of the Superclasico, just like you mentioned it. The first Superclasico of the year. Usually the teams are playing each of them on their ground, Cerro Porteño, on their brand new stadium. Well, actually, they've been playing, 3 years now, I think, ever since the pandemic even started, a little bit before that. And Olimpia has yet to win there. So for Olimpia, it's also a big game, especially because you have Cerro Porteño dominating, just getting through rivals. Anybody that gets in front of Cerro Porteño is a little scared lately, and just Cerro Porteño is just going right through them. South America was the last victim, and now it's Olimpia, and Cerro has the whole week waiting for that Superclásico, and Olimpia might be a little distracted. They got Libertadores, they got to play against Fluminense. They're playing in Rio de Janeiro, outside of the country, so they got that flight also. We're going to talk about all of these things, and also big news coming in from the FA, actually, Roberto, between our last episode and this one, a big announcement that caught many by surprise. Actually, the president of the Paraguayan Football Association said he's done. His family apparently asked him to step down, and Robert Harrison won't go after a re-election. So before the end of the year, we should have a new president in the FA, and this is all happening right after our national team didn't qualify for the World Cup, which I know was a dream of our president also, and because he didn't fulfill that dream, I think he was feeling that it was a bargain on him, and it was a personal decision, just like he said it. But he's out of football. He's going to be out of the FA, and we're eventually going to have a new president. And this is a big topic here because the president has a lot of power. He has to be a good leader. Also, that job is just not for anyone. So we're going to see who wants to take that job now and try to get us to the next World Cup. That's also a big topic that we're not probably going to touch or talk about on this episode, but it's a big one, and it's going to keep on growing as the year goes on. Robert, it's nice to be with everybody again.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to mention that as well. The Paraguayan FA president, Robert Harrison, will not be going for re-election. Obviously, big news, and obviously is kind of, like you said, the main chief of how everything goes in the country, be it from the national team level or the club level as well. So it'll be interesting to see whose names will be put on that, especially after all the criticism that had been given to him over the last few years, and especially now with them not qualifying for the World Cup. So definitely some interesting times happening at the FA. But going to Maria here on this one, a bit more of a happy side, I would say, for Olimpia now. They got this qualification now against Atlético Nacional. They got Fluminense, like Fede had mentioned, playing in Rio de Janeiro tomorrow in the first leg. Then they go straight back home and play in the Superclasico. So really two intense games, I guess, to to really go into this week for Olimpia. But I think the way that they've been playing so far, especially how we saw in that performance, not just at home against Atlético Nacional, but obviously getting that draw in Colombia, the 1-1 draw against Atlético Nacional. I think they have to feel very confident heading into this game in Brazil, and then obviously hoping to ruin Cerro Porteño's unbeaten streak at the Superclasico in their home ground.
Yeah, guys, it's definitely good times for Olimpia right now. They are doing very well, better than expected, I think. And I think that's what was really helping them, because not everyone is expecting much from them, considering what happened last year. So it's just they're turning things around, and I think that's what really counts right now. Whether they continue to the next phase, or whether they stop and get defeated by Fluminense this time around in the Libertadores. It's still a good long way that they made it despite their circumstances. And like we were saying earlier, they still have Sudamericana, so they're doing most better than most. So they're representing us in every competition right now. That's something that's great for any club. And you have the Clásico coming up, so there's definitely a lot of pressure in that situation. Cerro Porteño has been playing well, so I think they should probably focus on that to put a good game and set a good foot in the local league. As of right now, they are doing all right, because I think they also are concentrated in the Copa Libertadores. But as always, a Clásico is one of the most important things that you just have to win it. So it's looking good for Olimpia, and I'm very happy for them. I am gonna keep a very neutral, not gonna expect too much of them. I think that's really working. So fingers crossed for now.
Well, it's funny that you say that. You say that Olimpia are doing pretty well, but looking at how the table stands, they're one of the only 4 teams that are still unbeaten after 4 games. With Cerro obviously perfect out of 5 games, Libertad and Resistencia as well. And going to Ralph on this one, a win for Olimpia at La Nueva Olla would be monumental, not just for them to get another win against them, despite the advantages that they've kind of had. Cerro obviously being maybe the better side. They got that win in the Supercopa back in December, and to do that in La Nueva Olla, a full capacity Nueva Olla, from all from what I've been seeing, would be big, not just for them in terms of confidence, but also for the way that the league could indeed be swayed another way, and could put into that could put everything open for all the teams involved.
Yeah, it would send a huge message if Olimpia were to win their away. They finally won at home. Remember, Olimpia had not won in the Manuel Ferreira for 10 games, their worst ever run in their history. And at the weekend, they beat Tacuary there with mostly a change team, because they're preparing for Fluminense. So they've got kind of that spell. They've broken that spell, which was definitely playing on their minds. But now to go to somewhere like La Nueva Olla and get a big result, I mean, it would be huge, especially as I would assume most of the team you see in Brazil tomorrow will be playing that Superclasico, because to Maria's point, the Clásico is, even as much as you want to focus on the Libertadores, you can't play a B team in the Clásico. No one would accept that in terms of the fans. So yeah, it would be a big marker if they could manage that. And we'll talk about it more towards the end of the show, but it's a very interesting clash of styles, which we'll talk about, between Julio César Cáceres and Chiqui Arce. And you have Chiqui Arce, the kind of the top manager, maybe Garnero as well at Libertad, but then you have Julio César Cáceres in his first real job, senior job, being one of the brightest young Paraguayan managers. So it's a nice clash on the bench as well as on the pitch.
2 former teammates also coming at it as well, with Cáceres and Chiqui Arce. So we'll get to that in a bit. But obviously, let's talk about what happened midweek with the Libertadores. We saw two of our Paraguayan sides compete for two spots in the next stage of the competition. The first one that ended up playing was Guarani. Remember, this was a Guarani side that was playing America Mineiro, Brazil. They got a huge result at Belo Horizonte thanks to a Jose Colman last-minute goal. Heading into that next leg in the Defensores del Chaco, it started off very well for Guarani. They got 2 goals inside 15 minutes to make it a 3-1, a 3-0 lead on aggregate for Guarani. But then everything changed in the second half. America Mineiro scoring 3 goals in the second half. Wellington Paulista scoring in the 59th minute, then again in the 74th, and then Pedrinho scoring in the last minute of the game, the 92nd minute, to send the game to penalties. Actually, this game was already tied on aggregate. In normal circumstances in the past, this would have meant that America Mineiro would have qualified because of the 3 away goals, but because CONMEBOL scrapped that, it went straight to penalties, and after a very, very long affair, it ended up going to America Mineiro 5-4 on penalties to see them qualify. And again, Guarani being so close to getting something. They were so close when they were able to get that win for the 2021 Clausura title against Cerro Porteño, only to obviously lose that. And now they do it again. Fede, I'll go to you on this one because, it's such a weird spell for Guarani in these last couple months. You start to worry about whether or not these players are really getting the idea of Fernando Huberto. We don't know if it's a mentality thing. I mean, what kind of conclusions can you come from this, from blowing off a 3-0 lead after 60 odd minutes in the second leg of a Copa Libertadores tie that not only is a blow for them from a morale standpoint, but also for a financial standpoint, because they lost off a lot of money for not being able to qualify to the next stage of the Libertadores.
Yeah, and just like you said, it happened to them again, right? Just like they ended the year in 2021 with that game against Cerro Porteño, that meltdown, right at their stadium in front of all their people. The party was all set. They were going to be champions. They had it most of the year, and Cerro Porteño took it away from them. And these last time around in the international stage, they've also had a couple of tough games, and they were winning 3-0. Or you just said it. I mean, they really had it for them, and they just didn't know how to handle it. Obviously, it also has to do with the beauty of the Libertadores, of these tournaments that we're seeing these kind of situations of teams not being able to handle when they have big leads, and it's not easy. Also, we can say from here, how didn't you handle a 3-0? How can you not have the ball? How can you not hide it away from the opponents? But they're attacking you from everywhere, and I think that was the big problem for Guarani. They didn't handle their strengths, and I actually think that they got tired too quickly, and they didn't have the style. Also, they didn't have their team set up yet. This series came way too fast for this Guarani team. I mean, I said it a couple of episodes ago. They didn't replace the players that left the best way possible. They had Davis Vasquez, a very young Colombian goalkeeper that had a lot of work in this game, and then the penalty shootout, also him hitting that very important penalty that could have given Guarani the pass to the next phase, and he hit the post. So it has to do with that also. The players coming through. I mean, I'm not going to say anything about Huberto and the style when the players weren't able to do the job, when they had a 3-0 advantage. I mean, I think it falls a lot on the players, and obviously everybody loses in this situation. Players, staff, and everybody, the board too, because there's a lot of money behind it also. And for Guarani now, it's only the local tournament. It's over like that for them. And the international stage is over, and they have to put their mind back into the local league and try to build up a new team. Thankfully, they bounced back from this, and they won in the local league the first game against 12 Octubre, an away game that ended this 5th week of games, and it was a good win, and they had Mati Segovia, a new player, a new star, which I talked about on the last episode, taking over and scoring a goal and putting a couple of assists also. So it's not all bad news for Guarani. There's a future, there's a bright future. They have really good young players that they can build on. But as for this game, they got to get over it. I think there is a lot of a mental thing on this team just because of what happened to them last year, and it happened again.
Yeah, it's something that keeps happening to them historically, because I remember 2016 at this same kind of stage, they just needed a penalty to win. It was a penalty in normal time. I think it's against Independiente del Valle, and Rodrigo Lopez missed the penalty, skied it like over the bar, and that's the guy that never missed. He never missed, and then in that moment he did. And you go back to 1997 against Gremio. They were also in a penalty shootout, Guarani, and it was the same thing, that they were winning. They were tying on the night, but they were ahead on aggregate because they'd beaten Gremio already, and they concede within something like 25 seconds. It goes to penalties. There's a crazy moment that Chiquiase is playing for Gremio. He breaks the net. His penalty is so strong in the shootout, and they have to get like a clothes peg. To go check this out on YouTube, people. Like, the referee gets a closed peg to try and put the net together. And from that moment, nobody else scored. 7 penalties, all missed. It was, so this seems to happen to Guarani. This is historically. I thought they set up the way I had suggested on the last show. So I was quite pleased with that. He went with Josue Colman just behind the striker, Fernando Fernandez, and it worked really well because they went 2-0 up very quickly. I think Colman wins a penalty, if I'm not mistaken. He sets up Marco Cáceres for the second goal, but then he got injured. And getting injured in the first half, Josue Colman obviously threw them off a little bit, their game. Their game was to play without the ball. They had something like 25% possession in the first half. It's the same in the second half. But what you saw in the second half was they just couldn't keep tight. In the first half, despite not having much of the ball, they only let América Mineiro have one single shot on target. In the second half, it's like floodgates are open. América Mineiro are everywhere, and the goals keep raining in. And to Fede's point, this young goalkeeper they have at the moment, because they kind of got rid of Servio. They sort of blamed him for what happened at the end of last season, his rush of blood to the head at the end against Cerro. But they haven't fully replaced. There's a lot of good goalkeepers in the league, but they went with this guy. And then they heaped all the pressure on him to take a penalty, the 5th penalty, which I don't think I've ever seen before. We saw in the English League Cup, Kepa missing a penalty for Chelsea, but that wasn't the 5th decisive penalty. That was because all the outfield players had taken their penalties and there was nobody left. So a very strange decision. I don't know how they got to that, and it hasn't paid off. And to Fede's point, it's a kind of financial disaster, because if you go out in this round, or if you had gone out in the first round, that's it, you're out. They don't have the backup of the Sudamericana now. So yeah, they just have a season or a year of playing local league football and trying to recover and build up some of those young players, like Fede said.
Well, now they have the chance to, maybe get that revancha from Cerro if they do make it to the final in the local league. So, it's probably a good time it's probably a good thing that this happened to them, because they can fully concentrate in the local league and actually get a win this time around. Everyone seemed to have been very upset about this loss, and all the players, even Jubero, all blamed themselves for this situation. There was nothing else but them, and like they say, they slept through it and they thought they won it all, and it happens to everyone. Something when you think you have it in the palm of your hands, but you just let it go. So it's a good thing, I think, for them to just concentrate on one league, and hopefully maybe they win it this time.
It is the beauty of this sport, really. It's like you can be in the control of your own destiny, and then you could lose it like that in an instant. So Yeah, I think that's true. I think for what I need now, it's to focus on what they can do domestically. I think obviously, I think it would be good for them to see if they can focus on maybe winning a Copa Paraguay as well. Being one of the teams that are very much focused and stronger than majority of the other sides, with a few exceptions, than all the teams in Paraguay. So yeah, it's we don't know what's going to happen from there. So I'm very curious to see how their season is. And like you said, Mania, they definitely need to get some wins, and they did get one actually. They got their first win of the season yesterday against Dos Octubre, a 3-1 win. So that's something to be put back on track. So I'll definitely have to wait and see. But another team that is really doing well so far this season, and have qualified for the next stage, is Olimpia. Olimpia ended up going to Colombia, drawing 1-1. Saul Salcedo getting the equalizing goal over there in Medellin to put Olimpia into the next stage of the Copa Libertadores, the final stage before the group stage, meaning that the winner will go into the group stage of the competition with the other 32 sides, while the loser gets dropped down to the Sudamericana, actually. So this is kind of a win-win situation for them. So, Maria, I want to go to you on this one because I think it's interesting to see where Olimpia go into this thing, because obviously Olimpia definitely wants the experience and the financial support heading into the group stage of the competition. Being one of the big names that they are historically, it would only make sense for them to be in the Libertadores, and they have to feel confident after what they've been able to go through in the first stages, the one against Universidad Cesar Vallejo, and then obviously now for Atlético Nacional. But it's a huge task playing these Brazilian sides, as Guarani definitely learned. So how do you view this for Olimpia? Because it's very difficult. I think you could say that out of all the ties that are out there, it's probably the hardest one that Olimpia can have, that a team can have, because of the history that Fluminense have and just how big and powerful that they've become. So is it really an Olimpia side that really can go and surprise yet again? I don't want to say surprise, but really go for something? Or do you feel that maybe heading into the Sudamericana, that's something that, looking at the other teams that might go into that competition, that they could then really aspire to win that? Because as great as we are supporting our teams in this competition, I just don't think Olimpia have the strength now to really compete for this Libertadores right now.
I was just gonna say that they are doing well, but remember, it's just the beginning of this competition, and Libertadores is one of the biggest competition and most difficult competitions in the world, I'd say. So, just to win it itself is just one of the biggest tasks that a club can do. And obviously, it's been a very, very long time that a Paraguayan team has won. So, it'll be a huge surprise to everyone if they do even make it to, let's say, the final. I know it hasn't been it wasn't long ago that Olimpia went to the final, but it's knowing their situation right now and how they've been in the past couple months. I wouldn't put it past it, I don't know, a few stages of the competition. And I'm just being realistic here. I think maybe even the Sudamericana, they can make it a little further, but I think that they should focus more on getting the league back into shape in the league in Paraguay, and then concentrating again, building a stronger team that is fierce and will go against anything and everyone, and just go through and pass everything. So I think that's what they should do. They are getting there. They're doing it little by little. So, but everything takes time. So to me, at least this year, I don't see it. I could be wrong. Maybe they do surprise everyone. Hopefully, in the back of everyone's head, maybe it'll be a good thing. So, but that's what I think.
It's actually though quite difficult if they were to get knocked out and go into the Sudamericana. It's actually quite difficult. It's harder than the Libertadores because they'll end up, you have to win the Sudamericana group to get into the next round, whereas Libertadores you have two. So there is that kind of complication, I suppose, of going straight into Sudamericana. But Julio César Cáceres has definitely got the side working very well for Libertadores in the 4 games so far. Like he's managed to have something like 40% possession or 42% possession. So they've never tried to outplay their opponents, even teams like Universidad César Vallejo. So that works very well, knowing some of his limitations, because one of the limitations they have is that midfield has never been that technical. The midfield, like they built the midfield around Richard Ortiz, who's kind of become a bit of a bruiser who just like kicks people. He often has about, I think his distribution is really always very low. It's like 65%, 70% pass accuracy. So because of that, he's built this team that can play quite direct. They're relatively solid. And with that, he's well set up for this game against Fluminense, because Fluminense are the team that are meant to try and take the game to them and be on top. So from that sense, they've got things, I suppose, playing to their strengths, knowing that they don't have this really technical team that can keep possession. But they are going up against the Fluminense side that's also very experienced. I was having a look. I mean, Felipe Melo has gone there. So talking about like Felipe Melo and Richard Ortiz in the middle is going to be fun to see those two go at each other. Then they have, Fred is injured, but then they still have Herman Cano, he played a little bit for Nacional in Paraguay. He's about 34 now. They have Ganso, who won the Libertadores with Neymar back at Santos. He was pretty much up there with Santos at the time. He was a great player 10 years ago. So they have a very strong team. And then there's just that little bit of revenge for Abel Braga, the coach of Fluminense, because he was still the coach of Fluminense back in 2013 when Olimpia knocked them out en route to the final. So I'm sure he'll be looking to try and get some revenge. But I guess tomorrow the main thing for Olimpia is just to avoid defeat. If they avoid defeat, they're in a great position.
Yeah, I agree with that, Ralph. They need to come alive to bring it back to the Defensores del Chaco and try to win it here in front of their people. And I think the people are going to be very important for that second game. There was a lot of fans in the stands in that game against Atlético Nacional. I think it's going to be even more, especially if they have a good Superclasico. And even if they lose the Superclasico, I think the fans are really behind this team in the Libertadores, and they know how important it would be for the club itself to get to the group stage because of the financial situation, especially. And you got to give it to the coaching staff. You got to give it to the president also, because he is paying all the debts. He has all the players are getting their money every month now, and there's no debts now. That's why I think players are concentrating on their work. They're playing really well, and the club seems a little bit more organized now than it was a couple of months ago. And I think this is actually showing also on the team and on the coaching staff and the work that they're doing. Everything that they put into the team so far this year in 2022 has worked so far in midfield, what they brought in defense, and they're finding solutions with these young players. Let's remind everybody that Olimpia was the only team that wasn't able to sign players for this season. That's why everybody has way more hopes for Libertad and Cerro Porteño to have a great Libertadores, because they have way more budget. They have players that have the pedigree. They have players that have the experience of Libertadores, and Olimpia does not have that. That's the truth about it. But they have new players, and it's a great opportunity for them, and they're actually really taking it, because Olimpia has some of those experienced players that they stayed on the team. Roque Santa Cruz left, but they still have Antolin Alcaraz. They have Richard Ortiz, like Ralph mentioned. They have Aguilar, their goalkeeper, even though he's not going to be for this first game against Fluminense. But they have the experience there. Derlis Gonzalez, I mean, that's a European player that that's quality right there. And putting in young players around those kind of guys, I think they're actually building something. I've said it before, and I'm actually believing as the games go by that this team can get to the group stage. And Fluminense, yeah, it's going to be a tough Brazilian team, but I'm loving the spirit around Olimpia, and everybody's running to the ball like it's the last ball of their life. And if Derlis Gonzalez just start scoring, or if they can find their striker, because they're going to lose Guillermo Pyre for these 2 games. Maybe they'll need another striker there, because Guillermo was coming in very well as a sub, and he was being a solution for the team in some games also. But he got sent off and he won't be available. So you need Derlis Gonzalez, you're going to need Jorge Recalde to score, you're going to need somebody to take all those chances that Olimpia is having. Yes, this team does not have the ball much, but I think they have a very direct football, and they're getting their chances, and they know what they're playing for, Roberto.
They do, and they know obviously the name that comes into when you're playing for Olimpia. And like you said, like a lot of these fans always like to get excited when it comes to these Noche Coperas, the cup games. I guess is the right translation. Knowing the history of the club, knowing it's also a rival, like Rojas mentioned, has played before, in that great run in 2013 against a manager that wants to get revenge as well. So, it could indeed feel like the start of something new for Olimpia. So perhaps they can surprise in Brazil. I mean, I think anything out short of a lot, anything more than getting a point, or not a point, or a draw or a win would be huge for them, heading back, especially now heading back home to the Defensores del Chaco, where they can take advantage of that. So very interested to see how Olimpia do. And obviously everything is also being tied up to what's going on in the Sudamericana. We do have to mention that there are Paraguayan teams that are in this competition as well. Obviously, looking at the teams that are playing in the Copa Sudamericana, we actually did see one of them to play, actually. General Caballero, the team that actually got to the Copa Sudamericana as intermediate champions last season, ended up beating Gol de America 3-0 in the first leg. Obviously, the game is being played at the Defensores del Chaco, so this was an away game actually for General Caballero. So in a way, it kind of helps them in a way, even though there's not really away goals in that. But still, huge result for a recently promoted side to go and beat a side that's been in the first division for quite some time. And the next game is obviously Nacional against Guarani side that obviously we talked about in the past on just episode, kind of those really bogey teams that we like to say, like teams you don't know what to expect from them, and they've always kind of been shocking teams as they go. I mean, Fede, I'll go to you on this one. I mean, looking at this huge result for Real Caballero, I mean, that gives them huge confidence. And for a recently promoted team, to get that, I think that's a huge financial advantage for them, is if they can get to the group stage, and also for whatever happens in the National Guarani team game, because I think that's important for these teams in these CONMEBOL competitions. The same thing happened to Olimpia, the missed opportunity for Guarani, but these Paraguayan sides definitely need that kind of money. And I guess in General Caballero's instance, because of the way that they've kind of made it there as intermediate champions, everything's starting to look pretty up for them if they can hold that lead in the second leg, that is.
Hey, the Sudamericana is very competitive, Roberto. I was just listening on Ralph, and even if you get out of Libertadores and you go to Sudamericana, you still eventually have to play Libertadores teams, because most teams that get eliminated from Libertadores end up playing in Sudamericana. And if you look at the last stages of Sudamericana, most of the teams that make it there are those teams that were eliminated from Libertadores. So you have to be ready to play against those kind of teams, those caliber teams, and those strong teams. And some of these teams, the Paraguayan teams that got ready for the Sudamericana, I think they are ready for the competition. Just as General Caballero, they want to make it big for their district, for Alto Paraná, for their city, for Juan León Mallorquín, because this is the first time they're playing an international championship. So it's very important for them. It is the first time. It's just as we said before, it is the first time even for most of the players to play an international game. So to have the opportunity to show themselves out there, I think it shows on these kind of games. And it's a great, huge 3-0 against Sol America, which obviously was the favorite before this game was played. We'll see what happens on the second game, but I'm actually blown away because General Caballero hadn't shown us this solid, strong team yet in the league, you know, and now they come up with this big win in Defensores del Chaco. It's just huge for them. And you were talking about Guaireña and Tacuarí. Those are the only two teams that have yet to win in the local league. And you know, most of these teams have tried to build up their starting 11 and try to come in strong to the Sudamericana, but that's not the issue for Guaireña. I don't think the same thing has happened to Sol America, who lost to Cerro Porteño right before playing this game against General Caballero. And we'll see what happens to Nacional. I think Nacional has really good quality players. And if I have to pick one team out of all the ones that are going to play Sudamericana, and I would love for Ralph and Maria to do this also, I would love to hear what team they think that's going to make it big this year in Sudamericana. I think last year it was 12 de Octubre that made it the farthest in Sudamericana. I'm hoping that it can actually be Nacional. I think they have the players. I love their style. That's a team that I've always followed. They have a coach that's been there for quite some time, and I think they can actually do something nice in Sudamericana. I'm putting my eyes on Nacional this time around.
Yeah, I was going to say Nacional was so close to being in Libertadores. Remember, they just lost that final game of the season against Olimpia, and Olimpia, I think they took it by maybe 1 point or something like that. So Nacional had a really good season. They hadn't won, though, until the weekend. So they were also, like many teams, seem to be suffering some kind of hangover from the off season or whatever it might be. But they do have a very interesting start. They lost their top scorer from last year, Villagra, that went off to Ecuador. But they have picked up a couple of interesting players. Richard Prieto was a very good left winger at General Diaz, and then he got injured when he was young because he was possibly going to move abroad. Then he got stuck at General Diaz with this terrible kind of contractual situation, which he only managed to get out of somehow last year. But now he's 25, still very good player, still very talented, scored at the weekend for Nacional. So he's definitely one to watch out for. So I'd say similar to you, that Nacional would be the most exciting team should they get into the group stages. And then just to point on General Caballero, Juan León Mallorquín, probably the first ever side to play continental football that's actually just named after two people, right? General Caballero and Juan León Mallorquín. Very strange when you think about it. But they're the first team from Alto Paraná to ever play international competition. So 3 de Febrero, the big club in the Ciudad del Este, they've never actually managed to make it to continental competition. Their stadium has been used a lot. It's a very big stadium out there. It's been used a lot by different teams, especially when they play Brazilian teams and they want to get more fans. But this is the first time, so that's really big for the whole region that they could get that win today.
Absolutely. Yeah, go ahead, Maria.
Oh, sorry. No. Did we forget Guaireña, guys?
That's your team. We left that one for you, Maria.
Of course. Yeah, I was just gonna say, let's not forget about our golden team, Guaireña. So good luck to them.
Good luck to them indeed. I mean, they definitely have been able to surprise some people, so maybe they could do it again this time. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. Like Fede said, I think, you know, I think the Sudamericana has always been a competition where a lot of people think, oh, it's easier because you don't have the big powerhouses that you typically have in the Libertadores. But I was looking at the group stages of like what will be the group stages. You got some really big teams there, a lot of history on a lot of these teams. So anything can happen. Fede, you want to say something?
No, ever since the format of this competition changed, actually, I think it's a totally different game now for especially for our type of countries, because in this first stage, you know, we have to go up against each other, and then the Argentinian teams, the Brazilian teams come in the group stage. You know, yeah, they have some sort of advantage, but it's just the format of the Sudamericana. I think it's gotten a lot harder in these last couple of years for our kind of teams to get to the last stages.
And it's been the case for a lot of these countries as well. I think you see Brazilian teams and Argentine teams with a huge financial advantage. Probably, I think Brazil, we all know, probably has the best league in the continent at the moment. And, you know, a lot of these teams are miles ahead of everyone else in the entire continent. So that's why for Olimpia's case, they can really not just give a a big blow financially to a Fluminense side that, you know, isn't obviously one of the big powerhouses that are strong, like a Palmeiras, for example, or a Corinthians or a Flamengo, but still is a huge result to beat one of the bigger traditional sides in South American football. So definitely interesting to see what happens there. And obviously heading into obviously the big game on the weekend is the Superclasico, the first Superclasico of 2022. Cerro Porteño against Olimpia at La Nueva Olla, the first time that these two have faced each other since the Supercopa Paraguay that Olimpia ended up winning. And it's going to be tight. It's a tight affair. Superclásicos are always tight affairs when it comes to these type of matches. I mean, obviously, the last time that these guys played each other in the league, we saw Cerro Porteño win there and win great, actually, if you think about it. So, you know, I think it's always going to be a tight affair. I think, you know, heading into the ground at La Nueva Olla, it's a heated cauldron. Like anyone that goes there, you know, obviously the last time they played, Cerro beat them just 1-0. But Ralph, I'll go to you on this one first because, you know, again, this is a Cerro Porteño side that has still not dropped a sweat, literally, you know, 5 straight wins to open off the season. We did see, obviously, the return of Jean Fernandez back into the side, a player that, you know, I think excluding certain matches has really a good clean sheet rate as well. I don't know the numbers, but it's very high ever since he's joined Cerro Porteño and has really good numbers in the league. So this is really heading into a good, and this is obviously also a testament to not just as John, the good goalkeeper, but also the great defense that they had. They just gotten stronger with the new players that they have. Looking at the midfield, we look at players like what would be Zamota coming in. The big name that we saw come into the offseason was Marcelo Martinez Moreno, who, because of the form that Robert Morales in it, who's kind of been the breakout star of the, I wouldn't say breakout star, maybe probably the best player in the league right now, maybe the best on form Paraguayan striker in the world right now, if you look at it, because the numbers have been great for him. You know, he's right now, he's top goal scorer alongside Julio Enciso, another player that's coming up. We've talked about how both these guys are the ones that are kind of dominating the league at such a young age, but I don't know. It always seems like Olimpia, you know, even when they're down, even when they're at their lowest, we saw that in the Superclásico, they've always made it difficult for Cerro. Cerro ended up getting the wins, but you don't see a convincing Cerro Porteño win getting against Olimpia. I haven't seen that quite a while. So, you know, perhaps that gives Cerro Porteño even more pressure heading into this game. I'm curious. I wonder what you think about this game heading up this weekend.
Yeah, the pressure is on Cerro because I'm trying to look at the last time they lost in the Olla, and I think it's a while ago because the last one they lost when they were home was when Fernando Cubero was coach, but that was played in Defensores del Chaco. So it's back in 2018 or something like that. So the last time they lost in the Olla, I can't remember. So definitely the pressure is on them from that point of view. I think also they know they can't go the whole season and win every single game. But remember, 10 years ago or 9 years ago, they did win the league unbeaten with Chiquiase. And so it's a realistic thought, the way they're playing at the moment, to try and go through the season unbeaten, maybe not winning every game, of course. So there is pressure on them. They must be the favorites going into this, being the home team, having a 100% record, and knowing that Olimpia have to travel back from Brazil. Then you look at the teams, and you were naming some of the players, and yeah, through the line, Cerro is a better team, almost man for man. There's maybe, I don't know, Delis Gonzalez. I mean, from that Olimpia team, who would you put in the Cerro team? Maybe Delis Gonzalez, Fernando Cardoso instead of Enzo Jimenez, probably, the way he's playing. But that's about it, really. I mean, I don't think you'd want many other players. Antolin Alcaraz is having a great season in defense for Olimpia, but I don't know if you'd replace him with the youngster Pulpito Duarte or someone like Patiño or even Riveros, who they've just signed. So I mean, yeah, it's just such a strong team. So the pressure's on Cerro. I think I was talking about it a little bit at the top of the show. I think what's really interesting about this is the two managers. They're slightly differing styles, and they both will complement each other, because Cerro want to play with the ball. They like a lot of possession, lots of movement off the ball, and they're going to be allowed that. Then what Olimpia kind of like is letting the other team come onto them and try and hit them a bit on the break, especially using these people like Jorge Recalde and Delis Gonzalez with their pace to get in behind, and they're going to have that chance. So in a way, the teams are set up to both play to the styles they prefer, and it'll be a really interesting matchup to see where that's going to work best. And then just my final point before I throw it out to the other guys, I think what's really important as well is mentality. So in the Supercopa, Jean Fernandez was sent off before the game even began for taunting the crowd. There was a lot of debate whether he should have been, shouldn't have been, but it was kind of a dumb move on his part. Last week, Guillermo Pyre in Olimpia got sent off for a very similar reason. It was just a dumb argument he got into with the Atlético Nacional player. Prior to that, against Libertad, he had been the victim of an assault, let's say, from Barbosa in Libertad. But again, it's because he was talking to him, saying things to him. So you have like a lot of this kind of hot mentality players, and that could also really throw the game to one side if somebody does lose their cool. So what's really important will be in that day with so many fans and the passion, and it's going to be hot, as in the weather is going to be hot for sure, is that the players keep their heads as well, past all the tactics and everything that the managers can do.
Yeah, no, it's going to be really a tight affair. I mean, Fede, going into this one as well, how do you see it? I mean, I know it's so early to look into the season as a whole, but like you said, Ralph, I mean, I don't know if the Cerro side can indeed go and be indeed unbeaten, but if they're able to get these results, and mind you, they still have to play Libertad, who I think is still the only other side that they can really compete neck for neck in terms of this league title. And I think that's happening at the end of, I believe, next month or something, if memory serves me right. Just looking at it's going to be on April 12th. So you still got a few more weeks left. But looking at the schedule they have Resistencia, another unbeaten side, 2 de Octubre, and General Caballero Juan Mallorquín before that Libertad game. I think, Fede, I mean, is it time to say that, if Cerro do indeed get this win in the Superclasico and then go into these next 4 games with possibly, 12 points, not 12 points, but maybe 15 points from these games, I mean, is it time to really start thinking about a champion here, or are we still very much early in the season to discuss something like that?
I think it is time to say that Cerro Porteño is the dominant team in Paraguay right now, and it's the team that's playing the best football also. They have the identity, they know what they're capable of, and they've had Chiquiaza for a while now, and that's a plus. Having a coach for so long, knowing what he expects of you, and he's fixing everything around all the problems that are coming up around. You get an injured player, you have somebody to replace him, you have somebody ready. That's Cerro Porteño right now. They have solutions for almost every problems, and they even have players like Moreno Martinez now. That's just such a top player, and he's just starting to play now in Cerro Porteño. He's just coming off his first a game as a starter for this team. So it's also going to be a special game for him in this Superclasico, his first Superclasico. I think he's going to want to score his first goal in this game. He hasn't scored yet in his first 3 games. So yeah, obviously, I think Cerro Porteño is the favorite in the Superclasico. Olimpia has their head in Libertadores. They have to play against Fluminense against next week. They're going to mix their team around. They're not going to put in a team that has been playing lately. And I just don't think it's going to be enough. I mean, Cerro Porteño knows what they're doing, and they have the confidence up there in the sky, and they're going to have they're going to have the people by their side. Obviously, it is going to be a tight game. I do think that's going to happen again, just because Julio Cáceres is evolving as a manager, and I do think he's gonna put a better team in than last time around when they played in La Olla. Because that game, even though it wasn't a 1-0, a great goal from Claudio Aquino, I do think Cerro Porteño dominated that game, and even though Olimpia had a couple of chances, it was all Cerro Porteño having the ball and controlling the game, and it could have even been more for Cerro Porteño. And I'm kind of expecting to get that game again. Cerro Porteño dominating with the ball. Olimpia does not like the ball that much. They have like direct football that we were just talking about, and from the Olimpia side, you're hoping that if they have a hero in the game, they're gonna have a star in the game. It's gonna be a young player, and in Cerro Porteño, no, you have players that done it and once and again. And what I love about Cerro Porteño is that nobody's relaxed, Roberto. I mean, the competition level in that squad is just tremendous right now. And I don't see anybody taking it from Cerro Porteño right now. Just seeing how Libertad is playing, seeing how Olimpia is playing, they're distracted playing the Libertadores. Resistencia does not have enough. And Cerro Porteño, they're the team to beat. And until somebody beats them, Cerro Porteño is the best team right now.
I think it's gonna be a little bit more of a, like you said, Fede, a little bit more of a tight game. I expect, and I'm already sort of giving my prediction, but I am expecting like a tie in this game, and simply because I like I said earlier, I think Olimpia is gonna play this game with everything that they have, because a clásico is a clásico, and this is their biggest rival. So they are concentrated in Libertadores, and they might have a different kind of team to not have those players get injured in case of injuries for the upcoming important games like Libertadores, sorry. But I think it is going to be one of those games that they're going to give their all. Olimpia has been playing better. Cerro Porteño, you can't really compare, but because both of them have been unbeaten in the past in this so far in this competition, so there has been more. Olimpia has been doing more in overall, I think, than Cerro Porteño. So in this case, they might be a little more tired. But like I said, they are going to give their all, and it's going to be like a very tight game for me.
So you say a draw on this one, Maria. I'll go to Ralph on this one. I guess we can go on predictions, I guess, to close it off here. How do you see this Superclasico going on?
I see Cerro winning, but low scoring. There's not going to be like some crazy 3-1, 3-2. This will be tight, like the guys are saying. But I'll go for 1-0 to Cerro.
Fede, how are you feeling about this one?
I see that Cerro defense is so strong right now. And just like you guys were saying, John does not get a goal in that easily. I think they're going to keep that clean sheet, and they're going to score 2 goals. And I'm actually seeing Marcelo Moreno Martin scoring his first goal in a Superclasico. That's my prediction, 2-0.
Well, what a way to start off your Cerro Porteño career, and scoring your first ever Cerro Porteño goal in a Superclasico. I mean, that's one way to get it off. But I agree. I do see a game that I think ultimately here we all say that, it's a draw for Maria. Cerro wins. In this case, Cerro does not lose in this one, because I see Cerro Porteño winning. A low scoring affair. I think 1-0. I think the defense is really, really tight. I think Jean is really performing and has been performing for so well in the last few months. I do see that coming about, but it's going to be tight. Like any other Superclasico. I think you don't want to underestimate Olimpia. I think they are a good team in itself, and they really want to go out for it and try to screw in the surprise. But I do think Cerro Porteño ends up getting this one. I think it's a 1-0 affair. Very, very tight game. But ultimately, that gives Cerro Porteño their 6th win, and to go 6-0-0 to start off the season. So obviously a really good discussion here, talking about everything from the Superclásico to the Libertadores to the Sudamericana and all the other things that we'll be talking about in the next few weeks. We'll review what happened next week from these games, obviously from the Superclásico, and looking into the national team as well as they close off their qualifiers for 2022. against Ecuador and Peru. We'll obviously discuss that and much, much more. So keep an eye on that, guys. And so to close it off here for myself, Roberto Rojas, Fede Perez, Maria Britos, and Ralph Hannah, thank you so much for listening in. See you soon.